Hello. So I got a new mic. Yay. Um, watching a video earlier that a friend of mine did. Somebody I follow. Beautiful person, beautiful soul. Truly. And they mentioned something to me. Well, not me. They mentioned something in the reading, channeling, whatever you want to call it. About how somebody was very used to being the hostess with the mostest, always entertaining their particular guest. Um, Person of interest, and how that's what they're used to, and how this other person, it was like, you don't need to do that for me, you know. And it got me thinking about a lot of things. There's a reason it's called presence, or being present. It's because it's a gift. Showing up in genuine, authentic energy, being comfortable enough in your own skin and in the circumstances and in the environment you're in that you don't require some kind of distraction or entertainment. Um, as they said, and I agree, is a very rare thing. Um, but it got me thinking about, it's very common for, as you know, most of my stuff is based about, I talk about addiction and spirituality and some other stuff. But it got me thinking about, um, a lot of addicts are, I don't have the credentials to properly diagnose them as codependents, but display a lot of codependence nature, you know. People pleasing is a huge one that a lot of people do, and a lot of people don't even realize they are, because of course it will hide itself in, oh, I'm just being kind, I'm just being generous, I'm being this, I'm being that, not realizing that, their motivating factor for constantly putting themselves out there and running themselves ragged is for essentially self-validation and the accolades. I got no problem helping the next person out. But I'm not going to do it to a point of detriment anymore. You know, old habits die hard. You know, I've said it many, many times. Unfortunately, most of us are taught a form of socialization or interaction with people that is transactional. And I mean, and in one sense, that makes sense, because it's a byproduct of very, very early society, hunter-gatherer days, when we had nothing but the barter system. You scratch my back, I scratch yours, kind of thing. Um, Unfortunately, it's just perpetuated itself to a extremely selfish and self-centered perversion in modern day society. Which I guess kind of goes back to the video I made the other day, using the 12 steps or interpreting them, adapting them, I should say. Uh, to facilitate a deeper level of spiritual awakening. Because, if you're in a 12-step program, going through that program in and of itself will give you probably one of several spiritual awakenings you have throughout your life, at least in my experience, which is kind of the whole purpose. Um, but I think yesterday I had said, uh, in the adaptation I'm coming up with in my mind here, all in the mind, is, admitted we were powerless over essentially dogma and that our spiritual lives had become unmanageable. And it's not just dogma as in the practices and principles of said belief system. It's also the condemnation and judgment that people give when you don't adhere to these set of rules. If you don't do this or that, then you're obviously not a true believer. Really. That's part of the dogma as well. Thinking that if somebody expresses their particular belief system in a different way than you do, then obviously it can't be right. No. Most addicts, when they get into 12-step programs, we have a term we use. It's called terminally unique. Um, a lot of addicts suffer from either a severely overinflated or underinflated ego. And I've said it before in many videos. Ironically, they produce very similar behavior patterns, and in some instances, identical behavior patterns or reaction patterns, I should say. But a lot of us, we have this viewpoint that very early in recovery that nobody has ever suffered like we have, and so forth and so on. I'm sorry if the video is somewhat cloudy. I have my phone case on and it's kind of scratched up and dirty, you know. But I tell you what, total side note, segue. It's a body glove case that I bought for like $8, and the thing is awesome, except for the fact that it screws with your speakerphone. Definitely watertight. I can't tell you how many times I've dropped my phone in a puddle or something like that, and it's been totally fine. And when I take it out of the case, it's like pristine, brand new still. So, but I think that happens too with I don't want to use the word religion anymore. When people start discovering their own faith, it's a better way to put it. You're taught this set of this routine. Hello, be gone. You're taught a particular routine, certain prayers, so forth and so on. And that's what it is. It's a routine, you know. Um, and it gives you confidence. It gives you confidence in your faith. And as that confidence builds, if you're not careful and you don't keep yourself humble, it can turn into a form of spiritual egotism. Or it can go the other way. It can, if you don't see proof of your faith with the expectation, with a certain expectation, it can start to make your faith waver. These would be the equivalent of an overinflated or underinflated ego. How about that? An overinflated and underinflated faith. And they will produce very similar types of emotional and spiritual reactions as an overinflated or underinflated ego will. The difference is the overinflated and underinflated ego will produce, um, I would probably say, more mental and emotional reactions, aka depression, anxiety, suffering. Take that observation and apply it to the seven deadly sins. And maybe you'll start to understand their purpose a little more. Let me, fuck it, I'll touch on that. Uh, the story of Lucifer, the light bringer, the first fallen. So many people have a misunderstanding and conception of who, what, and why he exists. And the other part that cracks me up is the stuff you read about it. It's written as if, God, who's supposed to be omnipresent and omnipotent, had all prior knowledge, was somehow surprised that this happened. No. It is there for a purpose. Remember, we live in a world of relativity. So, sorry, Lucifer Lightbringer, in my limited knowledge. This is a debate I've had many times in the One Sober House. Was that, devil's responsible for sin. No, he's not. Not at all. The devil did not create sin. The devil utilizes sin, as it's written in those particular books. And yes, it is a collection of books. To try to prove God wrong, that the power of free will was too powerful for man and that we would misuse and abuse it. That's it. That's the whole point. What they say the greatest trick the devil ever did was prove, get people to believe that he didn't exist. Why? Because then plants the seed of doubt. It's interesting. This park I stop at, it amazes me how busy it gets sometimes. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know where this one's actually going. I'm just kind of rambling, honestly. How the 12 steps adapt to spiritual awakening? Because it's saying you usually have one just going through them yourself. And then I think later you can use those same basic principles to engage into a deeper level of awakening.